Welcome, everybody, to Illuminate, Navigate, Radiate, a journey of emotional resilience, here with another episode of our Navigating Substance Use series. I'm your host, Brandon. Michael's joining us again today, as always. How you doing today, Michael?
Fantastic as always. Appreciate you having me on.
Oh, yeah, man. Always good seeing you. And diving into this week, we're talking about opiates. So it can be a lot of different things. Hydrocodone, oxys, Vicodin, morphine, heroin. There's a lot of them. And so we're going to kind of look at it from, the medical side of it as well as the street use side of it. So not quite like alcohol in our discussion last week, because there's not really an acceptable form of using these unless you're prescribed them. And even then, I think it can be a little touchy at times, depending on what you're getting prescribed them for. And I was a heroin addict. Opiates were a big part of my addiction. I don't think I've ever felt so controlled by something in my life like I was controlled by opiates. So I'll go into that a little bit as well and just talk about the mindset of when it did kind of just take over my life. But yeah, kind of going into this, I know you probably don't have as much experience with me in this subject, but just, it is a big conversation in our country, with the epidemic and all the lives lost to it. So just kind of like looking at it, what are your thoughts on opiates and, their use or the way people use them?
Yeah, it's always it's a touchy subject sometimes, especially if there's anybody who has either went through it in a similar way to you have, or maybe family members that had a negative experience with it. And I know even though touching on the medical side of things, it's still scary. You could be prescribed something, and while it may be rated for what happened, it's still at the end of the day an addictive substance. And I think that that's where I kind of maybe I'm fortunate in that sense that I did a lot of research to before ever really doing anything. So even before I even smoked for the first time, I did probably 4 or 5 days worth of research on, okay, what's really going on when you do this. And so I did the same thing when it came to opiates, and I just didn't see enough reward for the risk. And so that's kind of where my side of it would be different than yours, where I just didn't really, outside of a few here and there that I kind of maybe did dabble with, it was never anything that I considered a serious problem in my life that I ever partook in more than a one-off type of thing, because I understood kind of how severe the impact on the body is.
Yeah, and really, I'm kind of starting from, more recently, after I got clean, and the only time I think I ever had a healthy relation with opiates is I had some really bad tooth pain, and I ended up going to the ER for it because it was just something I could not deal with. And it was, being 9 years clean and getting prescribed, a form of opiate, is a little scary, not only for me, but, my wife, my parents, the people around me that saw me go through that. So it was very, controlled. My wife, had them, and we, did it by the time, the dosage, everything. And it was different being in a different mindset as opposed to like wanting this and wanting to take 20 of them to get high, and just like, this pain is so bad. I'm crying right now. I can't move. I can't function. And so even then, like you said, though, the prescription they gave me was for like 3 days. So it wasn't an excessive amount of time. It wasn't, taking it for a month or weeks, but that's where like you go anything over that, it does start to take over your body. Your body does need that to deal with any type of pain. And what I realized was, like, when you do take those for pain, when they wear off, that pain is initially worse. Like, that pain feels worse than what it did before. Um, and so it starts playing those mental games where you're like, I need this, I need this, I need this. And that's where even obviously I think we had this epidemic because it was prescribed so much, because it was overprescribed, and they kept filling scripts, and they kept, giving people more, and they were giving them the strongest dosage possible. and that ruined a lot of people's lives just to, for some people to make a lot of money off of. And I think when you really look at that, you start to see like the control of even using it for pain has to be so intense and intentional, um, that if there's any way you can take like some Tylenol, some ibuprofen, something to avoid that, I would just, I would highly recommend looking at any alternative before even, you know, thinking of that as an option.
Yeah, completely agree. And I know that even with the most intentional, not negative intent, the most positive approach to it can still not be enough. And while I can definitely appreciate how you were able to manage it, because you basically were in a mindset where you had family help you, basically you weren't just going to hide the prescription and say, I'm fine, I'll take it, I'm a grown man, don't tell me what I can and cannot do. You knew the history, you understood how the concern would be, you were receptive to the kind of needs and the wishes and the whole emotional feelings of your family. And without that consideration in mind, you wouldn't most likely wouldn't have taken that same approach and may very well not be clean. And as crazy as that sounds. And I think that's when it is prescribed medically, you need to make sure you have someone, whether it's family or friend, that can in essence, really just kind of help hold you accountable for taking them when you're supposed to, not before, not too much. If it is a short script, don't let you sneak in an extra one just because the pain is more. We get it. It hurts. I can only imagine tooth pain. I know that's got to be, it could bring a bodybuilder to his knees. You know what I mean? So that's where having that type of structure, I think a good foundation at home can be the biggest difference between abusing it and using it. And while I don't necessarily agree that the use is necessary, even in a medical environment, if you have to, I feel like the control needs to be there, which also kind of ties into a little bit of our topic discussion from this week. You got to find that moderation if you're going to use an opiate for medical purposes. And even we haven't really spoke about using it outside of medical purposes yet, but especially with medical, because it's prescribed, it's now in essence socially acceptable in that degree because you were prescribed it for pain. So if you take it according to the way you're supposed to, then cool. You're not going to get looked at. Obviously, you shouldn't operate machinery and things of that nature when you're under, I don't want to say the influence, but when you are on whatever you're prescribed. But it's just kind of one of those where I always feel like I'm walking on eggshells when I talk about it, because I know that there are people that have been more innocent than me and had a lot worse reaction from getting prescribed it for the first time in their lives. And I know that's just a scary thought to think about, and it's never something that you want to go through. And I guess an example I had is I was shadowing a physician assistant. I was looking at being a PA in high school. The PA left. I was just sitting there with the patient. It was the father of a daughter who had overdosed on, I think it was Vicodin, and it was the first time she'd ever got prescribed anything like that. That feeling just caught her off guard, and he said that within a month she was taking like 10 a day, and it just didn't stop, and she ended up overdosing. And I know that's just a very extreme example, but that was kind of a fortunate part of my life early on to say that didn't seem like a lot of good came from that, even though she was in pain. And I think that's where the focus needs to be on, yeah, like you said, can you get to the 800 milligram ibuprofen? Can you just get to the acetaminophen? Yeah, it might not take all of the pain away, but it may save your life, or if you're hoping someone save their life, you know?
Yeah, and I think, just kind of going back to the beginning of what you were saying with the, the support that I had, and the control and the checks and balances and the accountability, all that was super important. And I think that comes with any type of medication like that. And then, that's where, even with it being prescribed and even with it being a medical thing, that's why we have such a problem with it. And I've, obviously being a part of that lifestyle, and being in that, I saw so many people in that lifestyle that started with a prescription, and you get a prescription, they fill it, they fill it, they fill it. Eventually, one day, they're not going to fill it anymore, and then you're paying a lot of money for a pill, almost $1 per milligram or whatever it may be. It's a lot. And then you realize, heroin's cheaper. And that's where a lot of that transition happens. And I saw plenty of examples um, with that transition. And like you just said, somebody overdosing is an extreme example, but it's so common. And that's what's so sad about it is it really is a common thing that people lose their lives to it. And it's crazy to kind of look back on and think about the amount of control that it had over me. Like while I was on opiates, the way it controlled everything, my thought process, my emotions, my behaviors, and just everything. And it really started that summer between freshman and sophomore year for me, where I went home. I ended up around it, and I ended up snorting it, and then eventually, right before I came back down for sophomore year, I shot it up, and I didn't realize what I was getting myself into. But right when I came back, I wasn't the same. Like that first day back, I knew I wasn't the same person anymore because all I could think about was chasing that high, which made that preseason of skipping or faking an injury and just getting high and drunk all the time, like even that wasn't good enough. Like I wasn't getting that same high I was when I first used it. And so then it started controlling every choice I made, every behavior I had, every emotion I had. And it would control me to the point where once I was coming down off of it, I convinced myself that if I did not get it again, I was going to die. And so that's where, like, then my extreme behaviors, my extreme choices came into play because I was convinced that while this is leaving my body and I'm starting to withdraw and I'm starting to feel this way, I'm going to die if I don't get it again. And something having that amount of control over you, over that experience, especially now not having to need it anymore, not doing it anymore. It's really it's hard to understand. Like it's hard to like describe that to somebody, like where you really feel like and convince yourself you're gonna die if you don't get it again. And so just kind of like your perspective on that. Have you felt that controlled by something before in your life, or can you think about being that controlled by something?
Um, Not maybe not specific to this topic in opiates. The last week's topic, I'd have to say there was a time when COVID dropped where alcohol did control me. So I can definitely agree with thinking back on that time. I can't say that I was on the thought process that almost where you got to where you almost tricked your own human instincts of survival to basically convince yourself, like you said, that if you don't have it, you might as well not have had food for 2 weeks. You're gonna not make it, type of thing. And that's almost impressive to be able to convince yourself of that, which shows you how much control in a negative way that something can have on you. But for me, really quickly on that part, it was just, yeah, I just every morning, afternoon, and night, I was drinking, and I couldn't really control it. I had to make sure I always had a bottle. I maybe thinking back, it was more serious of a psychological thing where maybe I was convincing myself that I needed it. I might not have been saying I'm going to not get this or I'm going to die, but it was like, if I don't get this, I'm going to be mad or I'm going to be pissed off and I'm going to really be in a bad state of mind. So I definitely have to make sure that I satisfy that high, which was, intoxication. But so yeah, specific to that control, I'd say I could have experienced it. I don't want to say that it was on the same level as kind of where you experienced it and maybe others. But I guess I'm fortunate to say that as far as it comes with anything opiate related, I was very fortunate. I'll say the word blessed, but more so fortunate that some experiences early on in my life, my tenacity to kind of do some research on stuff helped prevent me from walking that path because I do have a few times when I did take Vicodin and marijuana at the same time. And I'll say I had the most amazing feeling in that moment that I probably ever had. And it was great. Shoot, why wouldn't you feel good on both of those at the same time? One of them's killing pain. I don't got pain. So just imagine, how that's feeling. And then marijuana, it's also almost a pain reliever in that sense. So I was combining two things that should never really be combined. And I did start to chase that a little bit. And I think it was fortunate again for me where I felt something happen kind of in my heart chest region where it just didn't feel right when I came down, and I didn't ignore it. And I think that's where maybe I was fortunate to separate myself from other people in a similar position. Didn't just like, oh, okay, I'm good. I'm fine. Let's just go again. Run it back. I'm good. So that's where, on the other side of the coin of kind of the control side of it, I'm grateful, I guess is the best way to put it, because I was fortunate to not have to walk that path and then have to come out of it.
Yeah, and that's, I think that's why I fell in love with opiates. And that was, it was really, last week I kind of touched on, writing that thank you letter, thank you and goodbye letter to heroin. And it killed all the pain for me. It killed my emotional pain, any type of physical pain I was feeling, but really that emotional pain. And it made me just like, be on cloud nine, for at least a moment. And then it destroyed every other aspect of my life. And looking back at it in those moments, I thought it was worth it, but obviously it wasn't. Just going through some of the painful things I experienced, or looking back and just like thinking about some of those moments. Like I remember one time just sitting in the bathroom and looking at my arms, and I was just full of track marks, full of track marks. I had so many up and down my arms, because I've been doing it so much, and I was just like, I was baffled at like just being okay with that. And going from a college athlete where you think this stuff isn't going to happen to you, and then I'm in the basement of my parents' house in the bathroom just looking at myself like, what happened. But then like that's where you talking about that separation. I was never able to do that. I was never able to have that separation. It was like, yeah, this is miserable, this sucks, I hate this so much, but I'm going to go do it again. And I'm going to kill that pain and kill that shame and kill that guilt of what I'm feeling right now, and I'm going to get high again. And so it was a battle for so many years. And there was moments where I would get off heroin, and I was, but I would only be able to stay off it for a limited amount of time. And that was just because I was drinking and smoking so much. Like it was just like, okay, I'm gonna I'm gonna do this. And again, going back to that thing, there was no moderation there. It was always to the extreme. And then eventually I'd relapse, and it drove me, another one of those moments where I realized like how much it drove my thought process. I had moved to Lansing into an apartment complex, and I hadn't been doing heroin for a few months. And I moved into an apartment complex with two heroin addicts, and I would go watch them do it. And like, I want to watch them do it. Just, I don't know, I don't know what the association was, or if I was trying to like just ease into it. It like deep down, I knew I was about to do it again. I knew I was going to relapse. But it just like, it's kind of crazy that it would control me so much that even, when I wasn't doing it, I wanted to go watch people do it, and I wanted to be around it. And I just wanted it there, even if I wasn't the one consuming it. And it's just like really insane to think about some of those situations that I put myself in, thinking I was going to be able to get out of
Yeah, that's crazy actually. Like when I really think about that, the control that it had on you, where you could still be around it, not do it, but you had to still be around it, I guess, is kind of the way I understood what you were saying. And that's where it's just a very kind of doom and gloom type of thought process. It's like, and in the moment you don't really like, but you don't. So like, I'm not doing it, so I'm better than I was. Even if I'm around it, cool. I'm not doing it, I'm cool. But I definitely can understand how that type of hold it has. It's almost like an anchor that you can never cut. It's always going to bring you down. It's always going to be a reason to, or a justification to be around it, and then it be okay. And like you said, you'd be okay and be content with that being kind of how your life is. And I can only imagine what that's like. And I know that's a saying, it's an expression, but I literally can only imagine, and I can barely imagine, what you went through, how that affected your day-to-day life, your relationships in those moments with friends and family. It's just, I see it as such a miracle for you and for any others who have went through it to come out, especially to the deepest extent that you had went through it. Because I know that there were some dark times that we've talked about before that you've shared with, I think in one of the early videos on yourself about kind of where you're coming from and why this channel was being started in this whole journey and this program. So I applaud you for having, even if in those years you were doing it, you didn't really know it was in there, but there was some type of determination or motivation that was just buried that came out. Because here we are, almost a decade now, where you're able to like look in the mirror and say, I have not had a moment where I've relapsed. Maybe a thought in those 9 years of, dang, that was fun, but not to the point of, all right, baby, I'm gonna go outside and make a phone call. You know what I mean? And then you're not making a phone call. You're doing a lot of other things that you should be. So kudos, man. I know that you've probably gotten a lot of support from them, from friends and family, but I just feel like it's worth mentioning again, especially on this topic, because you overcame probably the hardest opiate out there. And it's inspiring, man. I'll be honest. I can not really relate to the consumption of it, but I know that people who can will find how you overcame it relatable, but also helpful. Because I can imagine being in that situation and not knowing where to turn, and talking to someone like you who made it out and is clearly doing well for, family, kids. So it's definitely one of those where it's not fun to think about, but if you are going through it, it's worth talking about.
Yeah, and I think that was, obviously I think the talking about it, and we talked about that a little bit last week, but the talking about it and the sharing about it is what really helped keep me clean early on. And I appreciate everything you just said. I tell people I'm blessed, like, because I don't. It's countless people I know now that have overdosed, and passed away. I know people that spent time in jail or prison for different actions or behaviors while on it or while chasing that high. And luckily I'm still here. I didn't. I think I got arrested one time down in West Virginia, actually. But it wasn't anything that stayed on my record. It wasn't like anything that really impacted me. And I'm lucky and I'm blessed that I was able to go through that and make it out. Because, like I just said, I know so many people that didn't. And it's such a hopeless feeling when you're under that type of control. Because even as bad as I wanted to quit, the different things, like I've seen people OD in front of me. I've seen people just in really bad situations, shooting up into infected wounds, or somebody who was pregnant shooting up, and just some of those things that you see people that they wouldn't do that if that didn't have that control over them. They wouldn't push that limit of losing their life if it didn't have that type of control over them. And it's such a hopeless feeling because you feel like you're never going to get rid of it. It's never going to go away. It's such a weight. And that's one reason, I wanted to talk about it specifically, is because it can go away. It can get better. You can get off of it and stay off of it. And that is like the biggest thing I want to say on this topic is, like, I was far gone into it, and I was obsessed with it. I was addicted to it. I lost so many opportunities in my life to it. I lost so many relationships. I lost so many friends to it. And it's not easy going through it. It's not easy getting clean. It's not easy, facing some of those things. But it's so worth it. And, if you're struggling with it, you're worth it. Right. And I think I convinced myself so many times that I wasn't worth it. Like, this is what I'm worth. I'm worth being a heroin addict, and that's what I deserve. That's what I have. That's what I'm always going to have until the day it kills me. And I realize now I'm not worth that. I don't have to go out that way. And I hope anybody listening can just hear that and realize that for themselves. Like hear that voice in your head that says, "No, you can do this, and you can get out of this, and it can get better." And tell yourself that every single day, because you have to convince yourself of it when you're deep in it and when you're trying to come out of it. Um, but that can, going back to a little bit to that control, it's been one of the most amazing feelings to not wake up and obsess over that bag anymore, over that powder, over that pill. Like just to have that relief that that's not where I'm at anymore. If I can tell myself that on a day I'm having a bad day, or a day that's tough, or a day where I messed up, and just say, hey, like, you're not out doing that anymore. That can help turn it around for me. And I just remember right before I went to rehab, I went out back with my older brother, and we were smoking a cigarette, and he just looked at me and he's like, dude, what the hell happened? And that was just one of those moments that it was like, I don't want this anymore. And I don't want people to look at me and think that I don't want to look at myself and think that. Um, and so, that's one of the biggest messages I want to say is just like, you can do it. If you're struggling with it, if you know somebody's struggling with it, reach out, start that process, ask somebody for help. And that can be the hardest thing to do. It can be the scariest thing to do. That that first day, that first week, that first month, sometimes even that first year is going to be insane. It's going to be tough. It's going to be mentally, physically, emotionally draining getting off that stuff. Um, but there's so much in life that is worth it. And I feel like I took away a lot of years because I numbed myself to everything, to emotions, to relationships, to friendships, to experiences, opportunities. I numbed myself. I took away those chances for what, and that's where the when you can realize that and put in that effort to do it, anybody can do it. You don't have to stay on it. And trust me, I know how tough it is to think that way. But I hope just sharing that and talking about it, it can inspire a little bit of hope in somebody that's listening, or somebody that's knows somebody's struggling, and that you're even losing hope for that person. Hold on to that hope. Hold on to that hope. Uh, Push that hope, and just if you know somebody going through it, remind them who they are deep down, because sometimes that can be some of the most important messages to hear when you're feeling like you're a piece of shit every day, already, because you're doing that stuff. So that's one of the biggest things I wanted to do talking about it. It's a painful cycle, um, that just goes and goes and goes until you can get that support. And I say support because I don't know how many people can do it alone, but if you can get that support, family, friends, doctors, rehabs, people that know what to say, what to do in those situations. So if you're struggling, reach out, and start that process of trying to get away from that just evil, painful cycle that opiates are.
Yeah, that's so powerful, especially the hope. I mean, in general, kind of the whole thing that you were speaking about is just a very powerful message of focusing on what you're worth, and you're not worth a bag and a needle. You're worth so much more. Even if someone else has to tell you that, even if you're not quite sure you can convince yourself of that in the moment, lean on someone who, despite it all, still may be there for you, even if you're not sure. Reach out to them for anything, even if it's just say, hey, what's up? I know that we're not on good terms because of my actions. I need help. And even just sending that is different than, hey, I need $5. Hey, I know I'm not supposed to talk to you, but can I get $10 real quick? I know you know what it's for, whatever. Just, I need it real quick, please. That's such a different message when you say I need help and you genuinely mean it. And I know that that's a difficult stage to get to, especially with how you got there yourself. But I would also say to what you're talking about as well. If you're someone who knows someone, whether it's friend, family, who is going through an addiction of this sort, and you do reach out, maybe don't expect it to be so receptive from day one. You may have to keep trying to get through to this person, and it could be a day to every day, every week, every month, even over, like you said, a year or two or longer. But I will guarantee you, and I think you can attest to this, anybody who was continually trying to support you from day one you are extremely and eternally grateful for that type of, I'll just say, positive or positivity towards you, regardless of how you accepted it in the moment. I know, thinking back, I can imagine at least you're grateful that people were still in your corner despite the decisions that you made that may have turned them away from you. So if you're in that situation, don't hesitate to reach out to the person who's struggling, seek help if you can. And even if they just give you the worst reaction because they're in the thick of it, don't cut them out of your life. Don't enable, but find a way to still show who they are. Like you said, tell them, remind them who they really are, whether it was accomplishments, accolades that they've done in their life, whether it's just them being a good person despite all this. I think that's just the most powerful type of external stimulation that you can get when you're in that type of mindset that can trigger a switch. And I think that once you can get to that, I cannot do this anymore, and you can convince yourself you cannot, it will start to navigate your way out of it. And I think that's kind of how I understand how it happened for you. You finally kind of got to that point where I'm either dead or I'm stopping this. And you thankfully chose to stop. And here we are a decade later, which is amazing. So it's scary stuff to talk about, but it's so important to feel good about being able to share it, because just like the isolating when you're not happy or when you're not in a good state of mind, when you're doing stuff that you know is very bad for you and you know it is, you're going to isolate more. So reach out. Even if you're on it right now, comment. We're here to help. Even if you're just having to scroll across this and you're just like, wow, I need help, drop a comment. You know, people will respond. We're here to help. And if you're someone like Brandon, you've been out of it for X amount of years, the decade, 2 decades, and you had it just as bad or worse, that can be most powerful for someone to read a message like that while they're in it. So anything that you guys have to share, I know we always appreciate the comments, and we want to make sure that anything that you're going through, we can at least try to help, because that's kind of what we're here for. And that's why we have structured it the way we have, to talk about some of this that stuff that isn't as easy to talk about.
Yeah, and just like I want to just hit on that again. If you are struggling, reach out. I mean, I'm not an expert. I've done I've lived a lot of the years in that lifestyle. Michael's not an expert, but we can at least point you in the direction, get you on the phone with somebody, get you the support. Even if you're not in our country or our state or our area, like, I'd be more than willing to help find a resource for you, because I know how hard it is. It took me weeks to get into rehab. Uh, from that point, and it took me weeks, and that's such, when it comes to opiates and heroin and all this type of stuff. uh Time matters. Like, you never know when it's going to be that last time you do it and you don't wake up. So yeah, reach out. If you know somebody's struggling. I've had people over the years say, hey, like, this so and so struggling, whether it was somebody's kid, somebody's sibling, somebody's, whatever it may be. People reach out and say, hey, will you just talk to this person? I'm like, yeah, of course I'll talk to that person. And I think that's just what you know, I, going through it and being a heroin addict is just the one of the worst things I've ever experienced in my life, and being controlled by that, and being on it for so long, and losing so much life to it. Like, it's miserable, it's tough, it's hopeless, it's lonely. And I just, I want to say, like, if you know somebody, if you're struggling, don't be afraid to reach out for help. Reach out to that person, offer help. I think this is one thing, like, no matter where you're at, this is something that we can all agree that it is a huge problem, and that we all need to support each other a little bit more, and support people going through it, because just seeing the pain that people go through when they lose somebody to it, seeing the pain that people are going through while they're on it, is really, really hard to see. If you can empathize with somebody, if you can be a human in that moment with that person. And so just encouraging that if you're struggling, reach out. If you know somebody struggling, reach out. We're in this together. This is why we wanted to do something like this, to spread that message that you are not alone. This is why we talk about so many different things and have so many different examples of resilience and emotional resilience and overcoming these obstacles and challenges and struggles. Because there is something that we all as people can come together and celebrate and uplift each other and support each other. And that's kind of what we wanna do. So again, you're not alone. And I know one thing that I needed to hear at times was like, you can do it. You can get off it. You can have a better life. And again, you're worth a better life than what opiates, heroin, fentanyl, any of that stuff can take away from you. Um, so yeah, thanks for joining us on this one. I appreciate it. Michael definitely joined in for this conversation. Appreciate you always being here and having these conversations with me, man.
Absolutely. It's always cool beyond just catching up, but really getting to dig a little deeper and kind of a pick your brain type of mentality with these conversations of like what you went through, some of the stuff that maybe I went through that you may have never even realized I may have even went through just because of kind of how I was when we knew each other. So it's been a journey for us as well. And I think that's what's so unique about it. Everybody's on a journey and no one's at the end of their journey at any point in their life while you're still breathing. At least that's kind of how I see. We're always, as long as you maintain a capacity to grow, there's always room for growth. And that's for the most advanced person who's got everything figured out to the person who has nothing figured out. But that's what's so cool about this community is everybody has a place, everybody's welcome. And like Brandon said, even if we're not the experts for you, we can help facilitate something in that sort of help range, whether it's finding a number, finding someone that you can reach out to, recommending a place to go. But don't hesitate to reach out. Let that be the first step on your journey so that you can become more emotionally resilient, because that's the whole goal of the whole program, is to just get stronger mentally so you can live a better life for you or others.
Yeah. So let's just continue to navigate this insane thing called life together, support each other, uplift each other, be there for each other, and support that growth in everybody around us. So, again, thank you, Michael. Thank you, everybody, for listening, joining again on a Friday. Like, subscribe, comment, whatever you want to do to jump into the community, jump into the channel, be a part of, because we want everybody to be a part of. So this has been Illuminate, Navigate, Radiate. Have a great rest of your day.